I don't know why I do these things to myself. I really don't. I wonder if some form of therapy isn't needed for these masochistic tendencies of mine. I mean, when looking at the landscape of the films that were out, three comedies, and I decided to give one a shot. My stance on modern comedies is pretty well known. So I looked at what was there, and there were two whose primary joke is, oh, she's fat or slightly overweight, and talking about her vagina. Yay, aren't we clever? That Oscar Wilde has nothing on us. And a remake of a 1980s, let's be generous and call it a classic, with typical 1980s questionable story elements. And I went with the remake. I don't think I would have been better off with the other two, but you're still left with that decision of why didn't I just stay home? Alright, so we got some ground to cover, so let's get to it. Full disclosure, because I'm going to rag on this film a lot. If I'm being honest with myself and with the 1 to 2 people who are actually watching this, and with Chewy and Mr. Chirpy, whom I would never lie to, you both have always been straight arrows. I would never deceive you. That's why you're here, to keep me honest. Alright, we tight. But full disclosure, this movie is not horrible. There are decent elements to it. Now, much like my review of Justice League, not horrible does not equal good. It just means that it is not as bad as it could have been. There were actually some scenes and some moments in it and some choices that were made that I actually thought worked fairly well. But when looking at the thing as a whole, it's just a mess. I think part of the problem, we're going to go off on a little tirade here, so if you'll indulge me, which if you're watching this, you're pretty used to indulging me, so, I don't see as now should be any different. Part of the problem in remaking an 80s film, especially in 80s comedies, and this is true of anything really, were very much products of their time, which means they were, in some ways, very high concept, with very little in the way of looking at the morals of anything. They didn't really care what the morals were. They were just looking at the funny situation. When the original Overboard was made, the concept that this guy, the Kurt Russell character in the original, essentially kidnapped, brainwashed, and I honestly can't remember if they had sex in that movie, but essentially raped the woman, and just like if he gave her roofies, was not in their minds when they made it. Mainly because those things weren't as talked about as they are now, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying it's good that we talk about those things now. We're more aware of it. But what they were more interested in is, it's funny if this rich bitch suddenly had a poor family. That was the point. And the moral elements of it were not thought of, for better or worse, is what I'm getting at. So I think that's why comedies like this one, like the original Overboard from the 80s, got away with certain things, and why people still watched them and laughed at them, because they weren't thinking about it. And yeah, when you think about those things, yeah, there's an icky undercurrent to it. kind of like, here's a good example. A film I really enjoy, a comedy I really enjoy, is a film starring the late John Candy called Delirious, where he plays a soap opera writer who wakes up in the middle of the soap opera that he's writing. He's living in the town that he created, and he finds that whatever he writes will happen. He can control what's going to happen. So he makes this one woman just fawn over him and worship him, and makes himself the greatest person ever to ever live. And I used to love that movie because as a writer, and that was the concept they were working from. Is writers love the idea that what they write could actually happen, because most writers, I would say most writers who are writing anything are doing so because they're trying to say, this is how I wish things were, So that was the fantasy they were trying to fulfill. But when you go back and watch the film, and I did a couple years ago, I watched it again and was like, wow. So he's essentially brainwashing this woman and tricking her into falling in love with him. And it was a little creepier, But again, the reason they got away with it is just the mindset of the time, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just explaining the mindset at the time they were more interested in what goofy situation can we do more so than the moral implication. Now, why I spent all this time discussing that is because we live in a very different time. Whereas back then, back in the 80s, the mood was a lot lighter, and let's just have fun with this situation, even situations that maybe we shouldn't be laughing at quite as hard. Today, our comedy is cynical. Our comedy is cynical. We want people punished. We want people to be treated badly. We want cruelty. I mean, I don't want that specifically, but I'm saying as a general rule, from the thing I'm picking up from, the comedies I've deigned to watch, is that for the most part, the audience or the people who are making these seem to feel we want much more cynical and mean-spirited comedies. And I bring this up because that is the first thing I recognize or I notice about the majority of this movie, is that it is way, way more mean-spirited. And whereas the first Overboard, when you watch it, especially when you watch it now, you get that kind of that creep in your stomach. This time, it is just uncomfortable, like all out uncomfortable. The level of torture she puts this guy through, and yeah, he was a jackass, but that doesn't give her the right, And again, a full disclosure again. Overboard, the original Overboard, was one of those movies that was a mainstay of HBO when I was a kid. But that being said, I've never actually, at least to my recollection, I've never actually seen the whole movie. I've always caught like the last half hour of it. I know the last half hour of it like the back of my hand. I've seen it so many times. But I don't recall much of the earlier part of the film. So I can't say for a fact this is true. Yeah, we know that in that one, Kurt Russell, brings this woman home, tells her she's his wife, and makes her, be his maid, basically. But I don't recall anywhere in that movie where he forced her to sleep out in the shed on a cot and gave her a bottle to piss in. I mean, again, I'm not going to say that the Kurt Russell character in the original was a saint and was doing anything okay. But what this woman does is akin to slavery to a certain extent. It's really uncomfortable. At least for me it was. I'm just sitting there going, oh my God. And I'm not saying I didn't get that same feeling thinking about the original Overboard. I'm just saying that, it's so much more blatant and so much more right out there that she's doing it, and it is a hateful, hurtful, negative thing. And it really took a long time to get through that. Any humor I found in the movie or in the situation was lost because it was always rooted in that damn ugliness. And I'm gonna be honest here too. And so that was a problem. And I gotta tell you, folks, you're trading down in actors. You are first rule. Just the other day when I didn't know I was going to go to the movies, I did an editorial on the two Sabrina films from 1954 and 1995. Now that was a remake that was done right because they didn't trade down in actors. The first film had Humphrey Bogart and Audrey Hepburn, and the remake had Harrison Ford and Julia Ormond. They didn't trade down. You have traded down in actors. You went from Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell to Annie, whatever her name is, and whoever this fish face dude is. And this is another thing, this is a personal thing, so buddy, guy who starred in this movie, if you're watching, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be insulting, but they kept going on about how handsome he was. The guy had a face like a fish. Okay? I am comfortable enough in my heterosexuality, I can admit when another guy is handsome. Hugh Jackman, Chris Hemsworth, yeah, handsome dudes. No problem. This guy, if this guy's handsome, then I'm handsome. Okay? And look at this. All right? No one's lining up for this. All right? And boy howdy, these two had no fucking chemistry. Not a drop. You could tell Annie, I can't remember her name. I'm going to call her the wrong thing over and over again. I'm sorry. But that just shows how much I care about the actor. I don't. She is from that overact school of comedy. Oh! And this other guy, oh my God. They were awful together. Awful. Any scene with the two of them is like gouging your eyes out. And here's another thing. And again, I can't compare this to the original because I don't recall this part of the original. So the guy gets amnesia. She takes him home, and for the first 10 to 15 minutes of this whole sequence, he's just looking around at how poor they are. I say poor because they still have a pretty big house with a pretty sizable front and backyard. This is movie poor. I wish I was that poor to own a house like that. Anyway, and he's going around and going, ew, poor, ooh, work with my hands, ooh, this, ooh, that. If he had amnesia, he wouldn't be reacting like that because he'd have no frame of reference that he ever lived any other way. It didn't make any sense. It made no sense. But he's going around like he still remembered being rich. And that was just bugging the hell out of me. I don't know how real amnesia works, but I know how movie amnesia works. I've seen enough movies and TV shows where people get amnesia. All right? It makes no sense. So now here's the thing. So as I said, the two of them had no chemistry, comic or romantic. And as you're making a romantic comedy, that's kind of a fucking issue. But here's the funny thing. This guy, and again, I don't know the actor's name, and I'm sorry. He had chemistry with everybody else. All the scenes that were not him and her were actually not bad. In fact, one of the choices I really liked about this movie was the decisively Hispanic flavor it had. The fact that his character is from Mexico City and all their friends are Hispanic in the town in Oregon that it all takes place in. And he goes to work for, goes with a grounds crew and, works day laborers with, other Hispanics. All of them had some really great chemistry. When those characters, when the guys he worked with and all that were talking, that all felt really natural. And I don't know if that's because they were speaking mostly in Spanish or what, but there was way more chemistry there. you know, and they're all joking around and, you know, laughing, and you're kind of like, I want the movie to be about these guys. Can I see a movie about these guys? Because these guys are actually engaging, you know. And he had, the main actor had decent chemistry with the three little girls. But here's the other thing, is that these three little girls had no personality. Again, and this should speak again, if you're comparing it to the original, the kids in that movie, they each had personalities. Yes, they were cliche 80s personalities, but they were personalities. These were just three little blonde moppets. Of course, you know, the eldest girl is all, mopey teenager, and I don't have any friends and all this. But the other two, it's like, who the fuck are you? No personality, no character. I mean, the kids did a good job. They did a good job with what they could have. But, you know, again, and that's another thing with 80s films versus modern films. 80s films, and you can say what you want about them, but 80s movies and 80s comedies especially had personality. The characters were all distinct, at least for the most part. I'm sure there were ones that weren't as good that I'm forgetting about. But, you know, the ones that are just popping into my head, the characters were all distinct. And that's not quite the case here. So yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a good... I mean, of course, the audience I was watching it with were all loving it. They were all laughing. Of course, this is the same audience that was talking. I had one couple sitting in front of me that were making out the whole time, and another woman whose phone went off 3 times, and Claire, who is the woman she was talking to, I know because I could hear her 5 rows down. Claire, I hope you're feeling better. She's going to call you probably soon now that the movie's out. Okay? So I hope everything with your son is okay. And I'm not making this up. This is what I could hear her during the movie. Not that I was missing any of the dialogue. I don't think it speaks well for your movie when the audience is verbally predicting the punchline of every sight gag. You know, there's a moment where at the beginning when, you know, the cleaning girl, Annie, whatever her name is, goes into the bathroom and he goes, oh, they have candy in the bathroom. Who has candy in the bathroom? She picks one up and everybody in the audience goes, it's soap. And she goes, it's soap. You know, the reason the guy fell overboard this one is he was looking for condoms. So he fell overboard. So, of course, when he watches up, the only thing he has in his pocket is condoms. So when she goes to the hospital to claim him as her husband, and they go, here's all the stuff he had on him, everybody in the audience, it's condoms. You know, literally, they all said it. It's not a good sign when your audience can predict the jokes. Okay? It's just not. So, again, not as bad as it could have been. You know, this could have been way more offensive and way worse. But it's mean-spirited, it's uncomfortable, and the two leads have no chemistry. And, you know, someone tell the fish face guy that mugging does not equal acting. They traded down in the talent. You know, and I don't care if someone's going to send me some emails or whatever. Of course, that would mean someone was watching this, so I doubt that's going to happen. But, you know, I don't care if anyone sends me messages going, oh, this guy's a big actor and, you know, wherever. It's like, well, he sucked here. And maybe they should think about raising their standards. That's me. It had some funny moments. I can't say I didn't laugh at certain things. I can't say that there weren't certain scenes that weren't really engaging. And that's the other thing. It does not feel like the two leads had any real on-time screen time to actually fall in love, which is supposed to be the point of the movie. You know, it just didn't. You know, so when he finally decides "I love you," it's like, wow, you got over that brainwashed and, you know, all that stuff fairly quickly. I'm sure they did in the original too, but yeah, it's way to drain my optimism, movie. I'm tired of talking about it. it's depressing, it's mean-spirited, it's ugly, and it's blah. So, final grade. I'm gonna say a C. Part of me wants to go lower, but again, if I'm being honest and I'm being, truthful with myself, there were some good character interactions with the workers. There were some genuinely humorous lines. The chemistry with the little girls and the main guy was good, and it felt genuine and real, and got you emotionally connected where the main love story did not. So it had good moments that deserved a better movie, and the better movie deserved better actors. So I'll say a C on this one, and tell you just to ditch it. Don't bother. If you're a fan of the older one, definitely, if you watch this one, you'll see some of the little throwbacks and callbacks and things, which is okay, but I don't think it's worth it just for that. So there you have it. But again, what did we expect? You're sandwiched in between, Avengers and a Star Wars movie in a couple weeks. So of course, it's going to be downtime a bit. So, maybe we'll get something better next week. So anyway, thank you for watching, and as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movie. I'm in hell. Sorry about that.